So in 6 months' time, this guy has cleaned out 50% of the blockages in his coronary arteries. I mean, they're
Wow.
gone. I'm a smart heart surgeon. That can't happen. And I go, wait a minute, tell me about this diet. What have you been doing? So I put myself on my program and I lost 50 pounds the first year. And I started taking a bunch of supplements from a health food store. And my arthritis went away, my prediabetes went away, blood pressure became normal, cholesterol became normal. So I started with people I would operate on. Believe it or not, these people started having the same things happen to them that happened to me.
Welcome to the Better Human Podcast. My name is Greg Witz, and each week we're going to be bringing you some incredible and inspiring guests and topics that are going to take your life to the next level. Thanks for spending time with us. Sit back and enjoy the show. Dr. Stephen Gundry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Great to be here.
Well, it is an honor, and as I was sharing with you a little bit before, I've been following your work since the Plant Paradox, and it's an honor to have this conversation, and selfishly, I'm going to treat it like a little bit of a doctor's appointment, but I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about, part of being a better human is our health, right? And just understanding food and in some cases what it does, because we're inundated in this world of diets and books and stuff. In fact, I was thinking about as I was prepping for the show, what are some of the strange diets that I've heard of? And recently I had a friend go through the carrot diet where they just drank carrot juice for 2 weeks. Now that turned them orange, and I don't know what it did, but hey, they heard drink carrot juice, right? And I remember back in the day, maybe the late 80s, early 90s, my mother going on the rice diet, right? Where all you did was eat rice. I don't know if you remember that one. So, I think in the world that we live in, food and our bodies becomes really the foundation for this, and understanding, what's accurate, what's correct, what actually works and doesn't work is really important. And back to where I started following your work, the reason I started to follow your work was because in the Witzes, we have a genetic issue with the stomach, right? We have stomach issues, intestinal issues. My father passed away from cancer very early, my uncle colon cancer, my grandfather stomach cancer, my sister Crohn's disease, and, started to lean into this world of gut health. And that's where I'd love to start the conversation with you, because we're going to lead back to the keto code. But can you talk to us a little bit about what are the fundamentals that we can look at or implement in our lives when it comes down to gut health?
Yeah, I wish I had been as smart as Hippocrates, the father of medicine, 2,500 years ago.
Right.
This guy said, all disease begins in the gut. And the guy was right. It turns out he didn't have the sophisticated tests that we have to look at leaky gut. If you had asked me 20 years ago what I thought about leaky gut, I would have told you it was pseudoscience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thanks to, among others, Dr. Alessio Fasano, who's now at Harvard, we know that leaky gut, intestinal permeability is a very real thing, and that I and others, including him, believe that this leaky gut, the damage to our gut wall, really underlies almost every bad thing that happens to us. And conversely, having a great gut microbiome, all these hundreds of trillions of organisms that live in our gut,
Mm-hmm.
and having that microbiome literally talk to us, to our cells, to our mitochondria, underlies great health. So, in fact, I have a fairly new patient who's a Buddhist scholar, and second visit, he says, you were talking about Hippocrates. Hippocrates and Buddha were actually contemporaries. And he said in Sanskrit, the interpretation of what Buddha says about enlightenment is that enlightenment comes from the intestines. And so, here's kind of Western medicine and Eastern medicine, and they're both saying the same thing. Everything comes from the gut. So you're right.
Look, I know when I'm stressed, the first thing I do is I feel it in my stomach, right? My stomach gets all messed up. And the second thing that happens to me, depending on the stress, is my back, right? So I believe in that. So, back to gut health, it all starts there. Microbiome. Quick question, by the way. Is it true that we're born with the microbiome, and as we go through life, that sort of depletes, or it gets affected and ruins, and it doesn't come back, right? So what we have is it, and it becomes about looking after that.
Yeah, we actually inherit our gut microbiome from our mother. As we come out the birth canal, she takes crap on us, to be nice. And it's actually her microbiome that seeds us. We also know now that her breast milk also has its own microbiome that seeds us. And that's actually one of the reasons breastfeeding is actually so important. The third thing we know is that about 10% of all the calories in breast milk we can't digest, but it's there to feed the gut microbiome and get that part of us off to a good start. So we're learning that we have this incredible symbiotic relationship with our microbiome. They need us to give them something to eat. And in exchange, they actually control our emotions, they control our immune system, they control just about anything you care to think about. We've decimated our gut microbiome because of overuse of antibiotics that either we take or have been fed to our farm animals to fatten them up. And so every time we eat a steak or chicken or pork or whatever, there are antibiotics in their flesh that kill off our microbiome. And that's been one of the big factors. The other thing, particularly in the United States and in Canada, for the last 50 years, we've been exposed to Roundup, which is glyphosate.
Yeah.
Glyphosate was actually patented by Monsanto as an antibiotic. And it was not patented as a weed killer. And little did anybody know that this interrupts the way bacteria reproduce, called the shikimate pathway. And, say shikimate 3 times, and it's particularly with a South African accent.
Right. It's going to come out. It's going to come out way different.
It's going to come out really good. Anyhow, so we actually, if you look at hunter-gatherers, modern hunter-gatherers, they have a very diverse microbiome. When you're down in Costa Rica, so you've got tropical rainforests. And tropical rainforests are unique because of the, diversity of all the flora and fauna. And we know that diversity, one flora and fauna, will be dependent on another part of this package that makes the whole thing. And we're learning that we're supposed to have a very diverse tropical rainforest that lives within us. And hunter-gatherers have this diverse tropical rainforest, tens of thousands of different species, and they all interact. We may, because of our lifestyles and the food that we've been exposed to, maybe only have 2 or 3 of these species rather than thousands. In fact, there's a new paper out just last week looking at people who were admitted to the hospital with COVID. And the point of the paper was that COVID caused these people to have just a disastrous microbiome. They might only have 2 or 3 species. Well, that's not the point. These are people who came into the hospital. COVID didn't do that to them. These are people who had a horrible microbiome, and that's why they got COVID. Right. And we've just sadly decimated our tropical rainforest.
Right. And with that, this is a lot of the work that you're doing, which is we can actually contribute and be more beneficial to our, call it tropical forest, rainforest, right? Depending on sort of, how we eat and, the process to go through there. So let's just jump into it. Your latest book is The Keto Code. right? Really demystifying the world of what it is. So I remember being introduced to keto years ago, where it was like eat lots of meat and lots of fats, right?
That's
Cream
right.
and stuff like that. And again, back to where diets become socialized and topical, people will read these things and they'll go all in. So can you break down the basics of a keto diet for us?
Sure. The keto diet is not new. It was actually, the word ketogenic diet was coined in 1930 at the Mayo Clinic. And it was noted that children with seizures, and there were no drugs back then, if they were given a very high fat diet, 80% fat, 10% carbohydrates, and 10% protein, that their seizures became actually easily controllable. And again, this is before drugs, and it was really miraculous. Now, unfortunately, as anyone who has children or grandchildren knows, it's really hard to get a child to not eat carbohydrates. And I've learned through my medical practice that it's really hard to get an adult to not eat carbohydrates. And in fact, the modern keto diet with a very high fat load, low carbohydrate, 60% of people who go on a ketogenic diet stop within a month, for really obvious reasons. I mean, how many pounds of bacon with a cheddar cheese chaser, can you have day after day? Just
sounds like an American diet, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's an American diet. So, over the years, when drugs came out for childhood seizures, that diet kind of fell by the wayside. But as anybody knows who have been on drugs or have treated people with seizures, these things don't make your brain work very well. Right. So in the 1990s, it was discovered that you could give kids another form of fat, which is now heard of, called MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. And medium chain triglycerides work unlike any other fat. They're absorbed directly from our intestines, and they go to our liver. And the liver turns them into ketone bodies. Mm-hmm. And so kind of presto changeo, you could take MCT oil, and it was found in kids that you could give them a lot less fat as MCT oil, and they could have a lot more carbohydrates and a lot more proteins, and they'd still be protected from seizures. So that sort of interest got me interested, and I, even in the Plant Paradox, my first, monster bestseller, I had a ketogenic diet that was based on MCT oil, and all of my books had this. So when I was trying to explain the benefits of ketones, as maybe somehow it's a perfect fuel for our brain, or athletes are taught, a ketogenic diet, it's the perfect fuel for our muscles, and we should always try to be in ketosis. Well, turns out not so fast. Researchers at the NIH, where I was a fellow in years past, and Harvard, took human beings and put them into ketosis. And lo and behold, they found that even at full ketosis, athletes, only 30% of their energy needs were met by burning ketones. Only 30%. That's not some perfect fuel.
Yeah.
And even our brain, which supposedly, loves ketones, even at full ketosis, 30 to 40% of the energy needs of the brain need to be met by glucose, not ketones. So when I looked at that data, I'm going, well, shoot, ketosis, all sorts of interesting things happen. You don't get seizures. You lose weight if you do it right, and people feel good. What's actually happening? It turns out that ketones aren't some great fuel, but they're what are called signaling molecules. Now, that's a fancy way of saying that it tells a receptor information.
Right.
It literally tells,
Transmitter.
yeah, and it turns out that mitochondria, the little energy producing organelles in all of our cells and in our brain and in our heart and in our muscles, get a signal from ketones to, believe it or not, actually waste fuel, to actually turn themselves into Ferraris rather than Toyota Priuses. Now, in the fuel crisis, most of us would probably want a Toyota Prius rather than a Ferrari, although we might want a Ferrari for other reasons. Right. But certainly saving gas would not be one of the reasons to get a Ferrari. Right. But so these ketone molecules actually signal mitochondria to become really high performance racing machines and to actually protect themselves at all costs. And we won't spend a lot of time talking about that. But in the process of doing that, the mitochondria actually improve their health, and they also waste some calories. And that actually accounts for why a ketogenic diet actually promotes weight loss if you do it right. Right. But the ketogenic diet is really painful and boring. So if ketones are doing this to mitochondria, there must be other ways to do the same thing. And so the whole book is, okay, what are the other ways to do this? And one of the most interesting ways is time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting, compressing our eating window. And there's a fascinating study using Italian athletes, Italian cyclists. Mm-hmm. And they put these guys on a training table. They had to eat the same food for 3 months, exactly the same. They were divided into two groups, depending on how long during the day they got to eat. So one group had a 12-hour eating window. They had breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. They had lunch at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they had to finish dinner by 8 o'clock at night. 12 hours eating window, 12 hours no eating window. Sleeping was part of that. The other group had a 7-hour eating window. So they had breakfast, break fast at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They had lunch at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had to finish dinner at 8, 7 hours. They followed them for 3 months. Their athletic performance was identical, but the athletes who had the compressed eating window lost weight. The other group didn't, even though they ate the exact same amount of calories, same food. The group with the 7-hour eating window had a marker of longevity called insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, improved. And it's one of our best ways of looking at longevity. And so just by compressing the amount of time that they ate, it had a major effect on them. And what we now know is that this effect was telling mitochondria to waste energy and actually get healthier. There's even more fun is plants. We know they have mitochondria, and their mitochondria are damaged by sunlight, which, it's one of those can't live with it, can't live without it. Plants have to have sun, and sunlight damages plant mitochondria. So plants make compounds in their leaves called polyphenols. And polyphenols are all those beautiful colors that you used to see in Toronto this time of year as the leaves turned all the yellow and oranges and reds and purples.
The colors.
Those were the polyphenols that were there in the leaves all along, and then the green chlorophyll went away, and we went, oh! So the polyphenols are used by plants to protect their mitochondria. And when we eat these polyphenols, it turns out that our bacteria, our gut microbiome, just think polyphenols are delicious. They love it. And it turns out those polyphenols, in turn, are delivered to us. And lo and behold, they are protective to our mitochondria as if you were on a ketogenic diet. And so the whole trick, the whole book is, okay, there's all sorts of other great ways to get the effect of a ketogenic diet without doing a ketogenic diet. For instance, I'm having a cup of green tea as we talk, and it turns out green tea is loaded with polyphenols. And just the act of having green tea or coffee will get my mitochondria in better shape. And it's got a fancy term called mitochondrial uncoupling, but that's not the point. I'm turning my mitochondria into Ferraris even as we speak.
Amazing. Well, I love green tea, so I'm glad to know that all the years I've been drinking green tea, I've actually been doing it right. So, okay, so let's come back to MCT, right? So here's what I heard you say. So really the traditional thought of ketos was they were the ultimate fuel, but then what happened was we went, oh no, they're not. They're actually only contributing to 30%. So it's a lot of wasted energy, right? There's this mitochondria that kicks in, that without that, it doesn't work as efficiently, right? And
Right.
of course, we want a Ferrari because we want to go fast, not because we want fuel efficiency, right? And in that, there's a certain amount of that energy being burnt off, which in some cases has to be awesome, right? So now there's ways, as you said, it's not just about going on the keto, it's about doing the other pieces that are activating, all right, the ketogenics.
Yep.
Okay, so back to MCT oil. Are there specific foods that we could be eating more of that have more MCT oils? Is there supplements that we can take? Is there how do we boost up that?
So MCT oil now is readily available. I mean, it's in Costco in the United States, for goodness sakes.
Right.
And the MCT oil is flavorless, it's tasteless. You want what's called C8 MCT oil if you can get it. You can get it. You can mix it in salad dressings, for instance. It's an easy way. You can put it in your coffee, a la Dave Asprey. Although he and I are friends, but I invented my version of bulletproof before him. But it's a I'm glad for him. So anyhow, so that's one way. But one of the fascinating things that I discovered when I started to research MCTs is that medium chain triglycerides, there's several of them, and they're all got a name of the Latin word for goat as the start of it. So the Latin word for goat is capra. So there's caprylic acid, there's caprolic acid, all of them start with the word goat. And you go, well, that's funny. Why would you name these things after a goat? Well, it turns out that goat and sheep milk are 30% MCTs as their fats. And so they're very prevalent in goat and sheep. And what's fascinating is that people who eat goat and sheep products like goat and sheep yogurts absolutely have impressive longevity. In fact, 3 of the longest living people in the world, their reason that they're so long living is not because they're eating grains and beans and breads. It's because they're goat and sheep herders. And that's where they're getting their longevity, because they're getting MCT in their food.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about the blue zones, right? And northern Italy is one, and you could just see all the sheep and the goat there, right? So for a guy,
in fact, you're near one of the blue zones, the Nagoyan Peninsula of Costa Rica.
Correct.
And believe it or not, as you probably know, most Costa Ricans have a lot of beans, have a lot of grains. But this area, the Nagoyan Peninsula, is distinctive because they're goat and sheep herders. And there's a paper showing that it's the goat and sheep cheese in that peninsula that differentiates them from everybody else who's eating grains and beans. In fact, they say, the people who live there, that the grains and beans are not a good part of their health, but thank goodness they have the goats and sheep that contributes to their health.
I think health and longevity and all of the answers just lie in some of the simple practices of what's traditional, right? Now, I don't do a lot of dairy. The thought of doing goat cheese and just I don't know if I could do it, but
You don't have to.
how much MCT oil should I take? I mean,
Well,
what
I
would
try to get people to get about 3 tablespoons of MCT oil a day into them. Sometimes, particularly women, have to work up slowly. If you try a lot, it can give you diarrhea or even upset stomach. But if you start slow and work your way up, it actually gets to be pretty easy. And I just use it. I mix it in with olive oil and salad dressings, and it works out really easy that way.
Hey, so sorry to interrupt, and thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you like today's episode and you want to learn more about some of our programs like the Better Leader program that can change your life, go ahead and click the link below.
Amazing. And again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our fuel to just be like, amazing fuel for our brain, right? And in the world that we live today with stress and mental health and, all the fears and anxiety that sometimes, can be projected upon us, our stability is a lot to do with, our mental fortitude and our ability to navigate these things like stress. So it really begins with that gut and that health and those ketogenics. Amazing. This is so interesting, Dr. Gundry. Okay. So intermittent fasting. I've been doing this for years, not because I actually ever tried to do it. It's just, I never ate during the days. I always started eating later. I never ate breakfast. I would break my fast later on in the day. So you mentioned you gave the example about the 2 sets of athletes, right? The shortened eating hours.
Yeah.
Specifically, you said that the one set of athletes started eating at 1 p.m. in the afternoon and finished at 8. Would that be sort of a good schedule to follow? Does it really matter?
Great question.
Yeah.
The work that Dr. Matheson has done from the NIH suggests that probably the best eating window is about 6 hours. So most of us try to get people to do 6 to 8 hour eating windows. There's a study out of Chicago that shows if I can get people to do that 5 days a week during the work week, they can kind of take the weekend off. What I try to do is I want you to have a program that you can live with literally and figuratively. This should not be a diet. It should not be hard work. If you think about our ancestors, nobody crawled out of a cave and said, "What's for breakfast?" There was no breakfast.
Right.
There was no storage system there. We had fine breakfast. And if you actually look at hunter-gatherers, modern hunter-gatherers, they start eating at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning when they find something to eat. So, and if you actually look at the history of breakfast, it's fascinating. Except for noblemen, nobody had breakfast. And the idea of breakfast started in England with the Industrial Revolution, where men would go to factories and they literally would work all day, and there were no lunch breaks, there were no breaks. And, they'd get home late at night. And so women would actually give them breakfast before they went off to work. It was, if you look at a modern diet, it's a Ramadan diet. You eat before sunrise and you eat after sunrise, and you don't eat or drink between. And so that's actually where the whole concept of breakfast came from. It's really the Industrial Revolution. There was no breakfast. And then, of course, after the turn of the last century, cereal companies just made this what it is now, and it's all marketing. There's no science that says breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Right. There's none.
Well, you walk down that cereal aisle, it looks like a magazine. rack, right? We're just like marketing or marketing or marketing or marketing or marketing. And, you know, talking about breaking fast, you know, in ancestry days, you know, in order for them to eat, they had to go and burn off a lot of energy, and they had to go chase down that food and find it, right? So there was a lot of energy burnt in regard to trying to get that food as well, right? Versus taking it out the cupboard. Someone once said to me, actually, and you'll appreciate this, they said, you know, if you look at the difference between like a European fridge and an American fridge, right? Specifically Italy, you'll open the fridge and there'll just be fresh color, right? Nothing stacked, right? But just, you know, lettuce, some other fruits, vegetables. And it's really, you're shopping every 2-3 days, right? Versus in the North America, I should say North America, including Canada, you'll open the fridge and you'll just see a bunch of boxes, all beige boxes, right? So, you know, part of the answer to this is fresh, natural, and basic again, right?
No, it's true. I lived in London for a year doing children's heart surgery training, and in our flat we had, you know, this little tiny refrigerator, and it was my wife and 2 kids. It's like a dorm refrigerator. And you're right, you had to go to the Greens grocer basically, you know, every day, and you had to visit the fishmonger. And I actually lost a lot of weight because you had to walk everywhere. You know, even if you took the tube, you still walked a lot.
Right.
And, you know, it's amazing just thinking back, wow, you know, just having that little refrigerator basically turned us into hunter-gatherers.
Right.
And it was so good for us. And we forget what a horrible thing our kitchens have become.
Yeah, you know, the life of convenience in some regards has, you know, we slowly forget to do these things. And then as you were saying that, you know, you were like your ancestors. You had to run and chase your food down every day, right? Even with the tube. Okay, I want to come back to uncoupling just so we could describe that, so we know what it is. And then we've got the better human question, which is at the end of the show. We ask, what could we all do to be better humans? But before I go there, I'm really interested just personally, where did this work begin for you? I mean, what turned you on to the world of, you know, the early days, writing the plant paradox?
Yeah, the early days, actually, for me, I was a very famous heart surgeon, professor and chairman at Loma Linda University. My partner and I, Leonard Bailey, pioneered infant and pediatric heart transplant. Was very famous for protecting the heart during heart surgery. And I was famous for operating on people who nobody else wanted to operate on. And I was referred a gentleman from Miami, Florida, who I call Big Ed in all my books. And Big Ed is a real person. He was 48 years old and had inoperable coronary artery disease. In other words, the stuff in his arteries was so thick, so everywhere, that you couldn't put stents in. You couldn't do a bypass because there wasn't any place to bypass to. Mm-hmm. And people like Big Ed would go around the country looking for idiots like myself to operate on him. And there's always idiots like that. And Big Ed spent about 6 months looking for somebody to operate on him, and everybody turned him down. He wound up with me, and I looked at his angiogram, the catheterization from 6 months before, and I said, you know, I got to agree with everybody. There's nothing I can do for you. And he said, yeah, that's what everybody says. But look, I've been on a diet for 6 months and I've lost 45 pounds. Now, this guy was 265 when I met him. Wow. Big. And he says, I've gone to a health food store and I've been taking all these supplements. And he literally had a big shopping bag. And he said, maybe I did something in here. And I'm going, well, you know, I'm scratching my professor beard and I'm going, well, you know, good for you for losing weight, but that's really not going to do anything in here. And I know what you did with those supplements. You made expensive urine, which what I truly believe then. And he said, well, you know, come on, I've come all the way from Miami. Let's get another cardiac catheterization. And yeah, okay. So in 6 months' time, this guy has cleaned out 50% of the blockages in his coronary arteries. I mean, wow. They're gone. Yeah, wow. 6 months.
Wow.
And I go, wow, that's impossible. You know, that can't happen. You know, I'm a smart heart surgeon. That can't happen. And I go, wait a minute, tell me about this diet. What have you been doing? And back in the dark ages, I went to Yale as an undergraduate, and we could design our own major. And so it was basically a master's program where you have a thesis and have to defend it. And so my thesis was you could take a great ape, manipulate its food supply, manipulate its environment, and arrive at a human being. And I actually defended my thesis, and I got an honors, and I gave it to my parents and went away to become a famous heart surgeon. So as Big Ed is telling me all this, I said, holy cow, this is my thesis. You're eating like, an early human would have eaten, and son of a gun. And I was actually, believe it or not, 50 pounds overweight. I was running 30 miles a week. I was going to the gym 1 hour a day. I had pre-diabetes, high cholesterol, you name it, I had it, arthritis. And, I was doing everything healthy. So, and then I looked through his supplements, and I was famous for protecting the heart during heart surgery. And I had this, glop that I put down the veins and arteries of the heart to protect it, and secret ingredients. And some of the secret ingredients that I was putting down the veins and the arteries, Big Ed was swallowing. And I'm going, what the heck? I never even thought about swallowing these things. So I called my parents and said, hey, you got my thesis? And they said, yeah, it's in the shrine. And I said, well, send it up to me. So I put myself on my program, and I lost 50 pounds the first year. And I started taking a bunch of supplements from a health food store. And my arthritis went away, my prediabetes went away, blood pressure became normal, cholesterol became normal. So I started with people I would operate on. I'd go, hey, I want you to eat this, and I don't want you to eat this, and I want you to go to a health food store and buy some supplements, and because I don't want to see you ever again. I don't want to reoperate on you. Right. And believe it or not, these people started having the same things happen to them that happened to me. So after about a year of this at Loma Linda, I made a really bad career decision for a heart surgeon. I said, I got this all wrong. I shouldn't operate on somebody and then teach them how to eat to avoid me. I should teach them how to eat so they never have to come and see me. Now, this is a very bad career choice that my wife would like to remind me of many, many times. Right. So I literally, with her permission, I resigned my position at the height of my career and moved down the street from Loma Linda to Palm Springs and set up a clinic where I said, look, I'm a researcher. Every 3 months, here, I want you to not eat this. I want you to eat this. I want to get blood work on you every 3 months. I want you to go to a health food store, and let's see what happens. And after years of that resulted in the plant paradox. And it was literally, here's what foods aren't designed to be eaten by you, and here's what you are designed to eat. And, it became a worldwide bestseller. It sold over 2.5 million copies, 36 foreign languages. Yeah. And the reason I think it's still a big seller is it works. Not a day goes by I don't get a message from somebody saying, you saved my life by telling me what foods to avoid. And so
you're the doctor of food.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but who would have imagined I'd become a celebrated nutritionist?
Yeah, well, I would still throw doctor in front of that, right? But what an amazing story. And I mean, as you're saying, like I was the idiot that said, okay, let's meet you and take you on. I would even change that I were to, innovator, someone that was like willing to look at things a little differently and see and be open to it. And, I think, without individuals like you, we don't have the breakthroughs that we need in medicine. I mean, I think what's so powerful about the work that you're doing is food is medicine, and if we know how to use it, quotations, use it, eat it, like what is and isn't, longevity and health and brain health and healthy relationships and healthy people is all about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to ask you about uncoupling. So can you just what is uncoupling? Because I know we mentioned it a little earlier, and then it could be a little fancy.
Sure. There was when I was trying to figure out the effects of ketones, there was an obscure paper that was written by a PhD by the name of Martin Brand in the year 2000. And it's got a very simple title called Uncoupling to Survive. And it's actually a very readable little paper, and you can find it. And he said, if you're starving to death, the mitochondria are what manufactures energy. And if they die, you're done. Who cares about your muscles? Who cares about your hair? Who cares about anything? If the mitochondria doesn't make it, that's the end of you. And so he proposed that ketones, which would be produced if you were starving, was a signal to mitochondria to protect themselves at all costs. And to protect themselves, they were going to basically waste fuel and repair themselves and recruit more of themselves to share a workload. And what he eventually found was, if you look at super old people, they have the most uncoupled mitochondria of anybody. So an uncoupling just is, if you think about making energy, is really hard work. And it's literally almost like a nuclear reaction that goes on in mitochondria. And it's very damaging to mitochondria. And mitochondria, we think now, mitochondrial dysfunction damage underlies most of our modern diseases, like, for instance, dementia, memory loss, heart failure, diabetes, all mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondria have a way of popping off this pressure, this damage, and it just so happens it's called uncoupling. I spent 6 months trying to figure out a better word, but it's in the literature, it's called uncoupling mitochondria.
Right.
Here's the best example. There's one of the theories of aging is called the cost of living hypothesis. And the cost of living hypothesis basically says, the faster your metabolic rate, the shorter your life, the slower your metabolic rate, the longer your life. And in general, it's a valid rule. Little tiny animals have a very fast metabolic rate. They don't live very long. Big animals like elephants or us or blue whales have a generally slower metabolic rate. We live a long time. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. The problem is birds. Birds live a really long time for their size. A parrot can live 80 to 100 years. Yeah. In Costa Rica, in the wild, they can live this long. A hummingbird in captivity, which has a heartbeat of 1,100 beats per minute. I mean, over 1,000 beats per minute.
Right.
A hummingbird can live 12 years, about the same as a big dog. So what the deal is going on? Well, it turns out that birds have really impressively uncoupled mitochondria. And it's actually the nectar and the seeds that they eat that provide the source of telling their mitochondria to uncouple. And so Brand was right. If you want to survive, you want to uncouple your mitochondria. And so the book is, okay, here's all the ways you get to uncouple your mitochondria. And it turns out spices are, the drug of the Middle Ages because they were all uncoupling compounds. And you can actually see, for instance, tea uncouples mitochondria, coffee uncouples mitochondria, chocolate uncouples mitochondria.
I think people are going to love that, coffee and chocolate.
Yeah, why not?
Right. Yeah.
Really fun fact. the three gifts of the Magi to, the three kings to the little baby Jesus.
Yeah.
Two of the three gifts were uncoupling compounds, frankincense and myrrh.
Wow.
And you go, son of a gun, why'd they bring frankincense and myrrh to the little baby Jesus? The gold I can see.
Right.
But these compounds were so valuable for their health benefits. And now we actually know why they were valuable.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So the analogy I got, or the visualization I got for uncoupling, would be like a pressure cooker with the steam valve letting out the right amount of steam so the thing doesn't explode.
That's exactly right.
Perfect.
And believe it or not,
when it lets out the steam, it's got the perfect amount of energy, and at that point, we're getting the right amount of fuel. And that's really the secret to the ketogenic diet.
That's the sweet spot.
That's amazing. Dr. Stephen Gundry, this is unbelievable. I'd keep you here for more, for as long as I can, for a few more hours, but we are coming to the end of the show. Mind-blowing. Just before we get into the last question, obviously we can get your new book everywhere, Amazon, drstephengundry.com. I think that's correct.
Dr. Gundry. Yeah, Dr.
Gundry. Yeah, Dr. Gundry.
Barnes and Noble, you name it.
By the way, I travel a lot. I still see the plant paradox in all the airports. When you go to the little shops there, and I always look, and it's the plant paradox. And it's a good book to have there because it's hard on being on the road when you're like a road warrior. You'll appreciate this, speaking and interviews and stuff like that, to eat well, right? So it's a perfect place to have the book. What else can we expect from you next year? Any upcoming things that you want to let the audience know about?
Well, we just started writing the next book. I can't tell you the name of it, but it's going to go even deeper into actually how our gut health really, you're right, it underlies everything. Women have been much more aware of this. They have a gut feeling that unfortunately men don't seem to. And it's very real. And Hippocrates was right. All disease begins in the gut. So that's actually the premise, and how to change that.
Right.
Well,
we're definitely going to have you back once your book is done. And, the question is, you can't tell us the name. Is it going to have the name code in it?
No, it won't have any code, but I can assure you it will have the word gut in it. So there you go.
Amazing. Well, I have your book. I'm halfway through it. It's excellent. I'd highly recommend it to the audience. At the end of the show, we asked the better human question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
The way we could be better humans is we should eat for our gut microbiome. And if we give our gut microbiome what they need to thrive, I can guarantee you that they will have us thrive, because we are their home. And one of the things why so many people have depression and anxiety and everything seems to be going all the wrong way is we have neglected the 99% of the cells that make us human, and that is non-human microbiome. And if we take care of them, they'll take care of us. So that's what I'm trying to get us to do.
Amazing. Keep doing the work that you're doing. It's important. It's an impact. And thank you for everything you do. To the audience, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Go and pick yourself up Dr. Stephen Gundry's new book, The Keto Code. And we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, you're going to love the next one.